going to be good. This one's sneaky good. Interesting game this week between two superstar quarterbacks in Russell Wilson and Cam Newton. Last season, Cam and the Panthers ended the Seahawks' chances of going back to the Super Bowl when they beat them in a divisional playoff game after eventually losing in the Super Bowl. Carolina has been seriously struggling, feeling that Super Bowl hangover this season, finding themselves in the basement of the NFC South. Meanwhile, Wilson has led the Seahawks to a 7-3-1 record with a healthy lead in the NFC West. Max, what's happened here with Wilson and Cam?
Well, the perception of them, I think. Look, this is what has happened basically. When you go through adversity, when a team goes through adversity, a player does, people scrutinize them. They start to look for what's wrong. And with Russell Wilson, that turned on cultural issues, and Stephen A., you'll address that more in a minute. And what people really want to know is, whether or not you fit into preconceived notions and stereotypes, what they want to ultimately know when they start asking questions about players is, are they authentic? And what I think people found out about Russell Wilson is he's authentic. This is who he is. Whether or not he always seems very open and giving of himself in terms of like peering deep into his character, Russell Wilson is the ideal football leader. He's the perfect quarterback nerd leader for your football team. And so he passed that test. And now the Panthers are struggling, and Cam Newton's being scrutinized. A year ago, who wouldn't take Cam Newton over Russell Wilson? Though Wilson actually outplayed Cam in the second half of the year. Cam played so well over the course of the entire season, including the second half. He won the MVP. Younger, bigger, stronger, the whole thing. Who wouldn't have taken Cam Newton? But through adversity, people have scrutinized Cam Newton, and I think they've found, at least in the court of public opinion at the moment, Stephen A., maybe Cam is not as authentic a person as they would like him to be, in the sense that when he talks, you get the sense he's trying to say the right thing and not simply saying what's on his mind. At least that's a sense I get. And so he is judged at this moment less favorably than Russell Wilson. That's my analysis of what's happened with these two guys, so to speak.
Well, I think it's a bit simpler than that. Russell Wilson's a winner. Cam Newton's trying to become one. Russell Wilson's a Super Bowl champion. Cam Newton has never won a Super Bowl champion. Russell Wilson has a 53-21-1 record as a starting quarterback and has never had a losing season in his career in the NFL. Cam Newton has been in the NFL for 6 years. 4 times he's had a losing record, which includes this season. In 6 seasons, 4 of them have been losing below 500. That's the reality of the situation. But that's not all there is to it. There was a point in time, and you brought up the authenticity of a Russell Wilson, where you looked at him and you just said, this is who he was. You actually had people who tried to insult him, talking about he wasn't black enough and all of this other stuff, whatever the hell that means, by the way, okay, which was just a ridiculous thing to say. I also think that, ultimately it was a situation where I noticed they haven't questioned that since he hooked up with Sierra. That's a different story for another day. He's very, very happy these days, and that definitely helps. But in the end, it also comes down to Cam Newton in this regard. Cam Newton had a ball when he was winning. He was dabbing and doing his thing or whatever, as justified as he wasn't doing so. Whether it's the Super Bowl thing that you poo-pooed and said wasn't a big deal, he should have just jumped on the ball when it was on the field. We pointed it to his post-game behavior because it was residue from what transpired throughout the season. Celebrating on the sidelines, being a guy that's very, very enthusiastic and vibrant and all of these different things. When he's winning, certainly not nearly as much when he's losing. And so you see the roller coaster of emotions that Cam Newton has gone through in his career, and you look at Russell Wilson as a model of consistency. He just seems to be consistently who he is. A lot of people view that and view that as contributing to the level of success that he's been able to enjoy, whereas they look at Cam Newton. Sometimes he seems to be a great, great dude and a champion. I happen to think he's a wonderful dude. But to a lot of other people, he comes across as a baby at times. Spoiled, and not sad, but melancholy in his own way that serves as a detriment to his own prosperity. I happen to believe Dave Gettleman has a lot to do with that, because when you let Josh Norman go and you have nothing to replace him and your defense suffers because of it, that puts more pressure on Cam Newton and the offense and what have you. But that doesn't mean that's how other people view it. So again, ultimately what it comes down to is Russell Wilson's a winner. Cam's trying to be one. Russell Wilson is a man, and a lot of people look at Cam Newton as somebody who's maturing to a level that Russell Wilson is already at.
We had a debate before the season started. Is Cam Newton tier 1 or tier 2? I said tier 1, you said tier 2. I think a lot of that comes down to when you ask that question of someone, how do they perceive what's going on? Do they take into account the trajectory of someone's career, or do they want to rely more heavily on resume because the present moment is uncertain, and so without more evidence, you rely on what's already happened time and again? I chose the former, the trajectory. You chose the latter, the resume. And right now, you look pretty good on that one as it relates to Cam. And I think the same thing can be applied to Russell Wilson. When you ignore it seemed last year that Russell Wilson had maxed out how good he was going to be. In the second half, he was as good as he could possibly be, and so Cam was that good, and he was going to get better. But what happened was, the culture around Cam, the team around him didn't get better, and he didn't contribute to that getting better. And so maybe last year was the best we will ever see Cam Newton, and yet Russell Wilson, steady as she goes, is still that same guy playing hurt all year behind a bad offensive line. But the guy that you look at and you say, you can rely on that guy. And I think that goes back to the authenticity of the individual and how we react to him. Russell Wilson has been tested that way time and again and has showed what he is, the ideal quarterback football leader nerd. And that's who you want for your team.
39 seconds to go. Giants down by 4. Manning calling signals. Takes the snap. Looks left. Lobs it left. First is right open. Touchdown Giants! Was wide open, and the Giants are back on top with only 35 seconds remaining. And one of the biggest upsets in NFL history, the Giants have beaten the previously unbeaten Patriots and have won Super Bowl 42.
Oh, the good old days. Our next guest made that memorable touchdown catch that gave the Giants a huge upset win over those undefeated Patriots in Super Bowl 42. But before that, he was drafted by the Steelers with the 8th overall pick in 2000. So who better to talk about the G-Men and the Steelers matchup than former NFL wide receiver Plexico Burress. Plex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Do the right thing, Plex. Do the right thing, Plex.
What's up, man? What's going on?
Plex,
Do the right thing, Plex.
What's going on, brother?
You're going to be the tiebreaker here for us. I hope you know. So, of course, being a former NFL wide receiver, you know all about good pass catchers. Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham facing off Sunday. Who do you think has the edge?
Let me just start off by saying this. Max, maybe you can agree with me, Stephen A. Smith. It was a time when you would see guys like Jerry Rice and say that, Jerry Rice is the best receiver I've ever seen. Randy Moss is the greatest athlete wide receiver I've ever seen. His record will never be broken. And then you watch a guy like Calvin Johnson be the fastest wide receiver to ever get 10,000 yards in 115 games. And then you look at Antonio Brown, what he's doing, and Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham Jr. is the fastest wide receiver to 3,500 yards. And Antonio Brown is on his way to being 1,500 yards in 4 straight seasons. And the numbers that these guys are putting up is just simply mind-boggling. Having played the position and knowing how hard it is to do this job, and I just look at the body of work of what these two guys are doing. I just shake my head. But if I'm gonna take one wide receiver right now with the consistency, I'm gonna go with Antonio Brown.
I mean, I get that, Plex, based on the numbers in recent years. It's difficult to prove based on that stuff that Odell is better. You mentioned Jerry Rice, then you mentioned Randy Moss, then you mentioned Calvin Johnson, and those eras really are their eras, right? There were a lot of great receivers in those eras, including T.O., including you, including a lot of other receivers, but it was their world, right? My eyeballs tell me, and this includes Julio Jones, who just is mind-blowing when you watch him. I mean, all these receivers, whoever you saw last, that's who you think is best. But my eyeballs tell me that this is going to be the Odell Beckham Jr. era. I think this is the way we're going to remember that era. I think he's just more talented, Plex.
I wouldn't say more talented. I would say it's more 1A, 1B. You know, you can't just jump on a limb and say, you know, he's more talented. You know, I had a great opportunity of playing with Antonio Brown my last 2 years in Pittsburgh, 2012 and 2013, and you know, just to get to practice and you know, to watch the way that this guy works. And when you see the results on Sunday, you know where they come from because you witnessed it firsthand. So I'm not just going to jump out on a limb and say Odell Beckham Jr. is a better talent. You know, I'm just going to go with what I see and what I know personally, and what I saw with my own eyes being there 2 years and watching what he does every Sunday. I'm going to go with the consistency because I know what I'm going to get every Sunday from Antonio Brown.
Come out on a limb. It's good out here. It's nice out here.
Well,
try it.
Well, listen. Hold on, Max. I will go this way. Let me ask you this question: Big Ben or Eli? Because obviously somebody's throwing those brothers the football, and you were there. Both of them throwing the football to you. We talked about this yesterday. Who would we want, etc., and why? How do you view both quarterbacks? Just like we're asking you about Antonio and Odell, what about Big Ben and Eli?
Well, you know, you guys kind of throwing me on the bus over here. But you know, I'll say this.
I'm just asking you a question.
Listen, man, hey, when Eli Manning was drafted, there was kind of an expectation level. When Ben Roethlisberger was drafted into Pittsburgh, nobody foresaw, you know, the career that he's having now. And both of these guys are two-time world champions, you know, MVPs of that nature. And I always say that, you know, Ben goes out and gets the job done. He wins ugly. You know, they don't really, you know, criticize him as much as Eli being up here in the media market. But having played with both of them, they basically have identical stats, identical numbers. You really can't say right now who is having a better career.
With the chips on the line, Plex, you're in the game. Who do you want under center trying to get you the ball? Eli or Big Ben?
Hey, I love both of these guys, man. They're great quarterbacks, two future Hall of Famers. And I've done it with Eli on that stage, so I know what he's capable of doing, and also Ben Roethlisberger. But I'm going to go with number 10 because I know he's going to put it up there in a nice spot for me to go up and get it. And, you know, he's going to give me that wink or that signal, or he's going to grab his face mask or pat his thigh or pat the side of his helmet and give me the signal for the best route for me to get open.
Yeah, people forget that Tyree throw is amazing, but the winning touchdown pass was to Plexico Burress. Without that, they don't win the Super Bowl. Sorry, Stephen A.
Without David Tyree, there's no Plexico Burress either.
Well, let me ask you this question, because as we sit here and we try to dissect the differences between two quarterbacks, the responsibility that is on Eli's shoulders clearly appears to be more, because the Giants, at least in recent memory, have not had the running game that the Pittsburgh Steelers have had. But then people look at Big Ben Roethlisberger and they see the hits that he takes, the punishment that he's had to absorb, which is different to some degree, inexplicably, I might add, to what Eli Manning has had to deal with, because Eli Manning is the one that's had a suspect offensive line. How do you gauge that? How do you look at what both quarterbacks have had to deal with and have had to endure en route to being as great as they obviously are now?
I mean, clearly Ben Roethlisberger is, one of the, if not the toughest quarterback in the NFL. By far who I played with as far as toughness. And he missed 4 games last year. And then you go back to Antonio Brown, the numbers that he had. Antonio Brown had over 1,300 yards when Ben Roethlisberger missed 4 games. So what would he have done if Ben would have played all 16? But it's definitely, Ben's missed some time over his career. He likes to extend the plays. Guys get wrapped up on his legs and sacks and getting it out of the pocket and extended plays. So he's definitely, have taken a beating over his career more than Eli Manning. And the Giants organization absolutely do a great job of, putting guys in front of them so that they can protect them. If you don't have Eli Manning, you don't have a contender to played during the season.
Plex, before we let you go, who you got Sunday and why?
I'm going to go with the New York Giants for this reason. I believe the defense is playing better. JPP is kind of getting back to his old self. Landon Collins is no doubt the MVP of that defense, probably of the team. And with the Dallas Cowboys coming in next week, I think it's a great barometer for the New York Giants to go out and make a statement game. It's not easy to win in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh knows that they have to get this game also. But, you know, it's the NFC East. And the Giants can pretty much, you know, control their own destiny. They go out and get this win Sunday against the Steelers, and knowing that they have the Dallas Cowboys coming into New Jersey next weekend, I believe there's two games that they can win. They can go on a run, and they pretty much control their own destiny. They understand that, and we have done it before, going on runs in December. You know, playing with a sense of urgency and knowing that they have to get these two games if they want to, you know, be a number one seed or what have you, and get to the playoffs.
Well, last question. How bad do the Giants want the Cowboys in your estimation? I mean, is it, and I know it's an NFC East rival. I know that they're going to want to beat them based on that alone, plus they're trying to get to the playoffs. But could you give us some insight into how all this noise about the Cowboys this year is possibly affecting the Giants?
You know what? I think the Giants like it that way. Nobody's really talking about it. Everybody's talking about America's team. Everybody's talking about the Dallas Cowboys, what Dak Prescott is doing, what Ezekiel Elliott is doing. They got him rated number one MVP and Rookie of the Year and all those kind of things. But nobody's talking about the New York Giants, and they're just quietly just flying under the radar, you know, stacking up wins. And you know, these next 2 weeks is going to tell a lot about this football team, and I think they understand that. And probably, you know, behind the scenes, they're sitting back. You know, they love it. You know, they're in a great position to make a run, to beat these two teams in the next couple of weeks, and they wouldn't have it any other way.
No question. I like it. Plex, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.